I'm Ann Perez. I used to be a high school English teacher, and now I create professional learning with friend and colleague Danielle.
And I'm Danielle. I also used to be a high school English teacher. We're so glad to have you with us today. So, today is our third session in our agency series, and we'll be talking about being open to growth. When I was looking for an article to ground our discussion today, something kind of interesting happened. When I searched for teacher growth, I kept coming across articles centering around fostering a growth mindset in students. Now, I love Carol Dweck, and I bet you do too. I also realize that teacher growth and student growth are intertwined, but I wanted to read about teacher growth specifically. And even some of the articles that had teacher growth in their title ended up actually being mostly about fostering growth in students. I guess it makes sense. When I was teaching, there was a ton of focus on helping students become aware of their own growth processes, but outside of the evaluative process for teachers, the same focus wasn't there for us. Maybe everyone is just assuming that, of course, teachers grow, but I think we need to be a little bit more mindful and intentional about it. So when I came across this image for grounding today that you see on the screen, I was immediately intrigued. It's from the Teach Thought article, 8 Ways to Grow as a Teacher. And the 8 ways presented here, you can take a look at them on the screen. They really resonated with me as a teacher. They're focused on educator growth and they ring true to the experience that I had.
Yeah, Danielle, speaking that experience, can you talk about a time in your career that really elicited growth?
That's a great question. So I was looking at this image, and ways 1 and 2 from the image really sparked a memory for me. So starting small and starting right away. When I taught AP Lang, something that the College Board always stressed was building student skills in critically analyzing a variety of different nonfiction texts, including extremely contemporary texts, like texts published right now, today. Of course, like a lot of AP Lang teachers, like a lot of teachers in general, I mostly came back to the same essays year after year. So in the fall of 2019, I went to a talk about climate change with author Jonathan Safran Foer at U of M. And I guess this sort of fits into way number 6 too, so stay curious. Well, I listened to that talk and I left totally inspired. But I had this thought that I rarely had my students read, analyze, and discuss science-based nonfiction in journalism. And I had definitely never done anything about climate change in the classroom, but I felt that it was so important. So on the way home, my mind was racing. Could I do a unit? Could I read Jonathan Safran Foer's whole book with my students? Where would I teach that? It was really exciting to me to think about this, but I was also becoming pretty overwhelmed because I had my year generally planned out. Where was I going to put this? Well, the next day I got to school and I decided, you know what? I'm going to do it today. So we were focusing on audience and the choices that an author makes to reach their audience. So I got on teenvogue.com during my second hour prep and I pulled one of their articles to use. It was only about a page and a half long, but I decided I was going to use it during my fourth hour. And it was actually great. So first, it was only my second time actually reading the article when I read it along with students. So they got to see me responding to that text with fresh eyes. Second, it was from Teen Vogue, so the intended audience, which we were studying about, was actually them. And that made our analysis pretty exciting. And third, I was meeting my goal of discussing science-based journalism in the classroom right away. So I started small, number one, with only one article, and that made it really easy and accessible for me. It was just a Friday class hour. But I also, number two, started immediately. And I think that that's really important. I was feeling passionate, so I rode that feeling and I turned that into action. And here's a really interesting part. So I was successful on that Friday. It wasn't that hard. So I was then inspired to make even more changes to my teaching and grow further. In fact, the following school year, I used new writing with my students nearly all the time.
Danielle, that's such a great story. How small change and something that you took a risk with and did right away had such an impact on you and your students. I think about a moment in my classroom that elicited growth. And back to that image you shared in the beginning, my moment is centered around seeing learning as a system and staying curious. And so it was in the fall of 2018. It was the beginning of a week, and a paper was due for my Honors 11 students later in the week. And And I had a question that I've heard before, and it was the question of, do teachers get together and always plan everything to be due on the same day? For whatever reason, I had this split-second moment where I'm curious about what the student's really asking. Do I engage and ask more? Or do I make the assumption that I kind of know what he's getting at and I want to stay with my current system and due date? Curiosity is what I chose to lean into. And so I said, can you tell me more about what you're asking for? And kudos to him, he did. He explained that they had a lot due that week, in particular on the same day, and asked if they could have an extension. That question really got me to think about my system. Again, right at this moment, I'm having all of these thoughts of, well, I have due dates for various reasons. It's the system I've created over 15 years. It's how I manage grading hundreds of English papers and get them back in enough time so students can use that feedback for the next. And here at this moment, I'm faced with the system that I've created and works for me. And I'll be honest, works for the students most of the time, but the question was legitimate. So I asked the students, what would it mean if I gave an extension, even by a day? To my surprise, some students actually were confused by that. Well, I already have the paper done, or what does that mean? It also made me think of how students live by the system, right? They hear a due date, they don't consider that they could turn it in early if that works better for them. And to be honest, I'm not sure I encouraged that because, again, the due date is when I was ready to start collecting this stack of papers, and so on we go. And so when I look at this moment and the evaluation of the system I was using, this question the student posed and the curiosity that I was starting to lean into, I did decide to change my system. A small change. I offered everyone a day extension, but those students that were ready to turn it in on the day that I had set could do so. And those that needed that extra day for whatever reason could do so. What I found was that it required vulnerability. I had to let go of some things, and that was the growth that I was faced with. The other growth and why it was so significant was changing my system a little bit did change other decisions that I had made, other activities, learning that I was doing and thinking about, but sometimes hesitant to fully enact because of what it required me to let go of or modify in my system. I guess ultimately, though, what happened from that exchange, from leaning into that question, from exploring what it would mean to have a little bit of flexibility, even in when I collect an assignment, I saw positive change from my students, and it encouraged me to keep trying these changes in my class. And so when I think about these takeaways from both of our stories, I see we both had to be vulnerable. We had to be willing to try something that was new for us and to see what happened. I also kind of reflect that growth can't take place in isolation. In both instances, we enacted the learning or the thoughts or the change that we wanted in our classroom and with the support of our students. And finally, small starts can lead to bigger opportunities. Again, in both instances, I think we both tried to enact a small change, but ultimately, because of our willingness to see it through and to work with our students, we were encouraged and inspired to keep moving forward, which led to continued growth.
Those are great takeaways, Anne, and they leave me feeling inspired to grow even more. And I hope that you're feeling the same way. So, the question is, what is next? Well, I definitely recommend the reading 8 Ways to Grow as a Teacher by Teach Thought. It's a really short article, but was really inspiring for me. And of course, you can refer back to our PD on a page and the other resources there for being open to growth. Thank you so much for talking with us today, and we will see you next time. Bye.